Good evening, everyone. My name is Janet Abrams, and I'm speaking to you from Washington, D.C., and it's my honor to welcome you this evening on behalf of the White House Fellows Foundation and Association to our webinar focused on the White House Fellows application. I was a fellow during the Clinton administration, assigned to the offices of domestic policy and communications, and after that, tremendous year, a tremendously important year for me. I have committed, along with many others in the Alumni Association, and you're going to meet a few of them tonight, a few others, to volunteer to reach out and spread the word about this incredible opportunity for development, growth, for service at the highest levels of our government. So tonight, we're going to talk about the application. I want to say to each of you who's joined, congratulations. This is a great step, whether you are already down the path and committed to applying for this cycle to be part of the class of 2023-24, or you may still be mulling the idea of tossing your hat into the ring this year or in the future. It is a big effort and a great sign that you've joined us, so we thank you. I remember myself looking at the White House Fellows application brochure back in the day when we had a physical printed brochure with the application, and I looked at it with awe and a good bit of trepidation. Many essay questions with word limits, many letters of recommendation required, a memo to the president, oh my gosh, what topic should I choose? These are all questions that come up and can be scary for some. And so tonight our purpose is to demystify the application. We want to make it more user-friendly for you. We want to clarify what's being asked, and to offer some general guidance on how you might approach each component. So again, thank you for joining us. And I want to, if Jen Swanson is helping us behind the scenes, wanted to go over our program for this evening. You'll see we have our welcome introductions. We'll move through those. We will be joined by the Director of the President's Commission on White House Fellowships, either early in the hour or later on, we hope. Then we're going to walk through the application in detail. Then we'll have questions. I should mention that you can type in your questions in the Q&A function. The chat function is not open to the audience this evening. We hope to get to those questions that you put in either in writing directly back to you, or we will address them in spoken word. We'll have the panel, different panelists respond. We'll wrap up tonight with information on resources that you can take advantage of as you move forward with the application process. So I'm here in Washington, D.C., where tomorrow morning it's going to be 32 degrees. And I want to say hi out to my co-host, my co-moderator, Margarita Colmenares. Margarita, how's it doing out there in the Golden State?
You are going to be jealous if I tell you how beautiful it was today. Very good weather. Sorry.
No.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Okay. Well, it's going to be 23 degrees here this weekend in Washington, but yes, this is, you can gloat. So take it away, Margarita.
All right. So good evening, everyone. My name is Margarita Colmenares, and I had the honor of serving as a White House Fellow in 1991-92 at the U.S. Department of Education. My hometown is Sacramento, California, and I'm back in that hometown, and that's where I'm joining you today. And my current role is Director for the White House Fellows Foundation and Association. I'm Director of Recruitment and Outreach. So thank you all so much from the bottom of our hearts for joining us tonight. I'm going to start off with David Moore. So David, wave and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, Margarita, thanks. David Moore, class of 1996-97. I'm the executive director of the Alumni Association. So glad that you can join us tonight, and look forward to talking about the application, demystifying the written application, and getting to your questions. Back to you, Margarita.
Okay, and David, where were you placed your year?
I was at the State Department.
Thank you. Okay, now to Crystal.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Crystal Moore. I am a 2017 to 2018 White House Fellow, where I served in President Trump's administration in the Domestic Policy Council. I had the opportunity to work on the President's initiative on historically Black colleges and universities during my time as a White House Fellow. I'm joining you all from Austin, where I'm attending Afrotech, the conference this week, but I'm based in Jackson, Mississippi. I look forward to our conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kian.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kian Pham. I was a White House Fellow in 1985, serving at the White House Office for Trade Policy. It's called the U.S. Trade Representative Office. And I'm coming to you from Singapore, where I am on a business trip.
You
Yes,
get the
and-
prize for coming the farthest. Yay, Kian.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Kian, for joining us. Also behind the scenes is Elizabeth Gillis. So Elizabeth is there. She's going to be manning the chat room for us, or should I say womaning the chat room for us this evening. So Elizabeth, thank you for your support. And I see that Rose has joined us. Hello, Rose. Rose is our director, commission director of the White House Fellowship Program. And she is in DC, I think. Rose, would you like to go ahead and make some welcome remarks?
You're on mute, Rose.
You're on mute.
There you go.
I think I get the Boomer Award for all of these technical difficulties. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear
Okay.
you.
So sorry. I am Rose Vela. I'm the director of the White House Fellows Program. I'm very, very sorry about joining a little bit late, but I do want to welcome and begin by thanking the White House Fellows Foundation for this innovative approach in making the program more inclusive by conducting these webinars. So thank you all. I'll be here all evening, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Rose. So now back to Janet.
Oh, thank you so much. So Jen Swanson, behind the scenes, perhaps you could share the slide, which gets us into the application. We're going to walk through it and touch upon each of these items. We will first, let me just comment that we will dive in to each of these items. And I guess I want to stress that the folks that you'll hear from tonight really have depth of knowledge when it comes to the White House Fellows application. And we are excited to share that knowledge with you. Each of us stood humbly before the application when we were seeking to be included in the Fellows community. And beyond that, so that we made it through, that we completed the application and were honored to be selected for the next phase of what is really a 6-7 month selection process. The next phase are regional interviews, and then from there are national interviews where Rose brings the President's Commission on White House Fellowships together, and they make final selections and recommendations to the President of the United States for who will be White House Fellows beginning at the end of that summer. In addition to completing the application, everyone you're going to hear from has also read a number of applications in their capacity as alumni. We take very seriously our responsibility to support Rose and her team at the commission office in reviewing and rating applications. So I'm excited to hear from each of our panelists tonight that brings such a wealth of information. So starting with the declarations and the resume or personal information section, this is very straightforward. I would offer just two pieces of advice. One is be accurate and truthful, very important. And number two, get going. Start to input, especially the resume. We're a little behind the times. You can't upload your resume as a single file in one fell swoop. So you have to input piece by piece. So that's all I'll say about that. Rose or anyone else want to comment on that first part of the application? Rose, you're mute. It's okay.
Sorry. I know, I think that's very straightforward, Janet. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, super. We're now going to go into the essays. And what I'd like to do is invite one of our panelists to address each of the questions. And then after that individual is done offering some guidance on that essay question, others on the panel may jump in. So beginning with your current employment. David, thoughts on the current employment question? I think it's 200 words.
So thanks, Janet. I think this is the most straight up and straightforward of the essays to answer. You're going to have lots of opportunities throughout the application to describe, the work you've done, but this is really an opportunity to sort of bring it into tight focus of what you're working on right now. And I don't think there are any particular tricks to this essay. It's straightforward. Just tell the commissioners, the people who will be reading your application, about what you're doing, and I would suggest use metrics when you can to demonstrate impact.
That's great. Great point. I'd also note that with this question and really all of them, it's important to be optimistic and assume you will be chosen for the next round for those regional interviews, and be mindful that what you write could be something that you are asked about in the interview. So I would write it with that in mind, that you may need to speak from your own words, or there will be others who might use your own words in questioning you. So the next one is most significant contribution in your professional life. And I'd like to invite Crystal to address that one.
Yeah, sure. So I wrote down a couple of thoughts. I think this is the opportunity in the application to do what I call humble brag. And I think it's important to remember that you have to be humble because no accomplishment is done alone, but also it's your opportunity to brag and to stand out as a candidate. The first advice I would give you is recognize that, as we've all served as application readers. We are experts in whatever field we're reading application for. So I tend to read education and STEM applications, but I would encourage you to stay away from like technical jargon that may be too complicated for your reader, or they may not understand right away. So one, just start with the high level byline. What is the newspaper headline, Washington Post? For me, that was, I worked with a coalition of HBCU partners to raise $50 million to improve career outcomes for HBCU students. So start at the high level byline and then work down. Couple of quick points: be authentic. The commissioners are looking for authenticity in a range of backgrounds when they put together a class. So I know it's easy to think about everybody else's professional accomplishments, what they've done, but really think about what's authentic and memorable to you. Some of the best essays that I've read have been perhaps someone who parents or grandparents were suffering from COVID and how they overcame that, and it made them more of a reflective leader. And they brought that to the workplace to create an employee resource group, right? So think about your whole self and how that's shown up professionally. Lastly, your resume will have all your work experiences. So really think of your essays as your opportunity to go deep into the why. what did you do? Be specific, end to end. What initiative did you take? And then really understand that meaningful change happens when a lot of people come together. So what other role did others play? So those are a couple of tips. Happy to take other questions throughout the webinar.
That's terrific, Crystal. Anyone else want to comment on that essay? And I'd like to welcome Esteban Tapatillo, who has joined us, who is Deputy Director of the President's Commission on White House Fellowships, working closely with Rose. And I want to touch on a point that, David, you made a moment ago. You used the M word, metrics. And I would add, Crystal, to your great advice, that if this is an important accomplishment, how do you measure that? What is the impact? Is there a way to apply? Can you include quantitative data, qualitative data? If there's qualitative impact, make your description of that as concrete as possible. Any other comments on that one? Okay, we're going to move to your greatest accomplishment in the realm of community service. And I'd like to invite Margarita out there in sunny California to lead off on this one.
Sure. So hello again, everyone. Crystal, I really loved what you said about the humble brag. I think that's a good term. And also the authenticity. When we think about community service, many of you have probably accomplished several things in your life related to that, but we're not looking for a laundry list. What we want is for you to pick your most significant accomplishment in community service. And as Crystal suggested, very parallel in its structure. Give us the headline first, give us the top thing that you want people to remember, and then give us the details. And again, if you can, use metrics. I will share with you something that a White House fellow who reads said to me. And this person, by the way, happened to be the recipient of the Legacy Award, which is the highest award that we give to a White House fellow for lifelong service. And he said, when he looks at applications, he's not looking, what stands out to him are persons who have started an organization or taken a leadership role at the top of an organization, and not I'm a member of this or a member of that, but really what was again, remember, we're looking for leadership, potential leadership, demonstrated leadership, and this would be a good place to use that essay to show us how you've been a leader in your community.
Yes. Other thoughts on that? Thank you, Margarita. And well, I would add that it's terrific if you can say you initiated, you founded, you led. That's very important. You might also focus in on principle, on your values that come together to make you a leader. Is that you need not be the CEO of the organization, but thinking of Crystal's point, is that what is it that you bring to an organization? What is the contribution you make? Yes, great if you are the founder and the number one, but if not, what is that general contribution that you bring? What is the spirit you bring? What are the principles you bring to your professional life?
Yeah. Hey, Janet, this is David. Can I just add to that?
Yes.
Because that sounds very broad on some levels.
Yeah.
I want to encourage people to try to use flesh and blood language as you're describing these things. Sometimes I see applications where people talk in generalities about great things, but I don't come away with a sense of them as a person. And I think this is one of the essays where you can very much help paint a portrait of who you are. So when Janet mentioned, reference your values, figure out a way to bring those to life
Yes,
in what
concrete.
you're describing.
Yes.
Yep. Thanks.
I so agree. I so agree. Okay, now speaking of leaders in the White House Fellows community, it is my honor to reach my hand around the world and call on Kian Pham, who has been honored with our highest award, the Legacy of Leadership recognition. And Kian, I'd like to invite you to speak about the essay that requires you to chart out your lifetime goals in a few hundred words. What guidance might you share?
Okay. Well, before I do that, just to let you know that it is 86 degrees here. It's sunny. It's beautiful outside in Singapore. So I think in terms of the weather, I might beat Margarita in terms of sunny side. I'm
Yes.
right at the equator here in Singapore. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for the time to share. I want to give the audience a formula, and the formula is 3 + 1. Okay. In answering this question and also other questions, you will hear us overlapping in our answers, and that's easy to understand because we all former White House fellows and we've been there and we share a lot of commonalities that way. But the 3 + 1 is this. The first point is be authentic. Okay, you already heard this word twice in this conversation. Be authentic because you will face, if you're lucky to go through the interviewing process, you will face about 30 different individuals who interview you. And all they know about you is through your application, through your essays. So you have to be real, be authentic. Don't pretend to be anybody else because it will show during the interviews and you will look good. Okay, so be authentic. Second, show your passion. Okay, think about what you are passionate about and make sure that you show that in your essay. This one and others essays as well, right? To our community, to the country, to the world. So you need to show that in your essays, show your commitment. And that's the 1, 2, 3 right there, right?
Yeah.
Being authentic, show your passion, show your commitment. And the 1 is be a storyteller. Okay, don't be a statistic reporter. You know, I have this medal, that medal. All that will be listed elsewhere in the application already. Don't need to mention that. Be a storyteller. Tell your story, because that will differentiate you versus other highly accomplished people in the process. So that would be my advice.
That's terrific. Thank you. Thank you, Kian. Other thoughts on the lifetime goals?
That's it.
Yep.
Spot on.
Spot
Thanks,
on.
Kian.
Absolutely. I would propose that as you go through each of these essays, it's important to answer the question that is asked. Really important. When you're asked for your most significant achievement, there should be an achievement that you identify clearly. When you're asked about lifetime goals, make sure as you're telling your story, as Kian put so well, that you clarify, you state clearly what the goals are. it's also a good idea to step back and think about how your different responses relate to one another. And lifetime goals is one that's fundamental. So the one thing that has stood out to me in reading some applications, stood out to me as a little bit off, is when people have goals that don't seem to relate to professional accomplishment or community service accomplishment, or why they might want to be a White House Fellow. So I just suggest that your readers are looking, they're looking at the whole picture, and you have opportunities here to show different facets of yourself. But it's important to give a sense of a whole, both the facets and that integrated whole. Any other thoughts on the lifetime goals, Margarita or Rose, Esteban, Crystal? I think.
Yeah, I would say as you write your lifetime goals, I think our natural inclination is to just focus on your professional goals. Perhaps that's being Secretary of Education. And if that is your goal, please feel free to be okay having a big audacious goal for your life. We want to see that. But also I think of lifetime goals as being a trusted friend, a mentor, a community leader, a lifelong participant in the White House Fellows program, constantly giving back. So I'd encourage you, as you think about your lifetime goals, think of it holistically and not just professionally.
Yep.
Very well stated. Thank you. David Moore, we'll come back to you. Let's talk about the memorandum for the President of the United States.
I think this is probably, people find this the most challenging of the essays for a lot of good reasons, not the least of which is that if you are selected for either the regional interviews or subsequently the national interviews, you will probably get most of your questions on this essay, because the evaluators, the people at the regionals and at the nationals, want to see how you think and how you make an argument. Because ultimately, in selecting a White House Fellow, what they are doing is hiring someone to serve as a special assistant to either a cabinet secretary or a senior official in the White House. And so they want to make sure that you can get to the point, make a clear, concise, coherent argument, and get it across in very few words. That's the challenge of this essay. So I've read hundreds of these over the years, hundreds, and I can tell you, I've seen a lot of mistakes made, and I want to offer a little bit of advice. So number one, when you write your memo to the president with a recommendation, put the recommendation right up front. Don't go through a lot of throat clearing about this is an important problem, you should really focus on this, and then bury the recommendation somewhere in the body of the essay. Put it right up front. My thoughts. Second, ask the question, why hasn't this been done already? And the answer is because there are some trade-offs required. If it was obvious and it could be done easily, my guess is it would have been done. So as you make your recommendation, be cognizant of and cite where appropriate why it hasn't been done previously, or what resources in terms of either time, political capital or money or whatever might be required to make it work. And talk about the impact it's going to have. Obviously, you got to be very concise as you're making these points. Another thing, two other points about this essay I want to make. One is aiming at the right level. I've often seen people write fabulous essays, they're aimed at the wrong level. This is a presidential level decision memo, which means if the issue you're putting forward could be appropriately dealt with lower down by a cabinet secretary, for example, then that's not a memo to the appropriate to send to the president. If, so if the issue is education and it's something that could be resolved by the Secretary of Education, then you're not thinking broadly enough. So look at what I suggest is look at the president's agenda, look at the things the president is actually focused on in the real world. That'll give you an idea of the kind of level at which you should aim.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to offer my last bit of advice on this essay is a little counterintuitive. But back to that point we made earlier about wanting to show all of you, the breadth of your experience. I recommend you now. Others will disagree with me. I suggest you pick something outside of your immediate career field and discipline so that you show you have breadth of experience. So for example, if you're a doctor, I do not recommend you writing about medical policy. If you're an educator, I don't recommend you writing about education policy. Now, naturally, those are the areas where you might feel most comfortable and most at ease, and you might have a great recommendation you want to make. My worry is people can sometimes come across as a one-trick pony. If everything, let's say you're a neurosurgeon and everything you've done is very deep and very capable, but you present an application that makes it appear all you know about is neurosurgery. Well, that might be great, at the hospital, but is that someone we want to hire to advise a senior government official in the executive branch? So that's why I encourage people to try to, think about another issue outside your immediate discipline, because then if you do, what happens is people are really going to say, oh my gosh, this neurosurgeon, like he's on fire about education policy. Look at this. This is a fascinating person. This is somebody we want to talk to. That gets back to Ken's point about showing the passion. So look for those opportunities in that essay to take on something at the appropriate level. And I encourage you to find a topic that shows the breadth as well as the depth of your expertise and passion. Thanks, Jenna.
Great points. Others?
To second David's points, many times fellows do not end up at the agency where they have the most expertise, because the White House Fellows really is intended to be a broadening experience.
Yes.
So it is important to show that you have that you can think outside of your own box. For example, I was very lucky when I applied, because even though technically I was an engineer, I was working on environmental matters, climate risk, etc. At the same time, I was also very involved in STEM education. And that was actually my concurrent path while I was working professionally. So it was very easy for me to pick not a technical issue related to a cleanup, mitigation, why we needed to care about the environment back in the 80s, which is when I was doing this, but rather I wrote my essay around the topic of STEM and actually went back into history and the National Defense Education Act. And you could ask me anything about that, and I would be able to give you the answer and why it was necessary to repeat something of that magnitude again for our country. And I think Crystal will relate to this because of the current work that she's doing. But it's like it's never ending. Some opportunities, like David said, you have to ask yourself, why hasn't it happened? And my gosh, things. A topic like that has been around for such a long time, and there are so many challenges and barriers to us actually achieving, for example, having a great number of STEM persons available to work in our economy. We're still working at it, in other words.
Absolutely, Janet. I think what David said is so critical. I think of the entire application as to tell your complete story. So I do agree with writing a memo outside of your area, as long as you feel comfortable doing so. Just recognize that you are going to go through 10 to 15 interviews, and you have to be able to defend what you write, recognizing that the commissioners both regional and national, are experts in their field. I've seen the case where you may write a memo and then the person, someone is a commissioner who knows exactly what you're writing about, was involved in a decision directly related to that. So you don't want to get caught in a circumstance where you write something, you can't really defend it and justify it. And then the only other thing I would add is just be really careful with like the technical jargon. Recognize that if a memo is truly written to the president, it's gone through several layers of review between the Domestic Policy Council and different other organizations. So it should be written in such a way that anyone should be able to quickly grasp and understand what you're promoting, what your recommendation is to the president. So just be really thoughtful about not getting so much in the weeds to where a layman cannot understand what you're saying.
Let me
go ahead, Kian.
let me offer a different personal view on this. I think this essay question is the most tricky and unfair question in the entire application. Okay, we, the older alumni, had furious debates before regarding, whether we should expect an applicant who has never worked inside the US government to pretend to write an essay to the president, okay, in such a manner. Whether this question is a trap, and ultimately whether this question should be deleted completely from the application. We went through a lot of internal discussion on this in the alumni community in the past, okay? So my thoughts on this for the audience is, just be thoughtful about the topic you choose and how you present the argument. To me, as a reader of a lot of applications before, the what is not so important as the how. How you make your argument, how you present your position, and whether you know how to present things in writing. Okay, remember, you don't have time to sit in front of the president, so your memo have to do the sales job. And David said something really important. Put what's most important first, your recommendation.
David.
Okay, don't do the what I call the M&M chocolate approach, like you eat M&M candy, you save the best for last. Don't do that. Okay? Put the first one first, and don't lose so much sleep over this memo, because whatever you write, I guarantee you, okay, the interviewers will take it apart. Okay, and you have to defend what you write in a thoughtful way. That's why when you write, you have to be thoughtful about it. Okay, don't cite any fact that can be proven wrong during the interview. Okay, be thoughtful, but let's focus on more on you, who you are. We're looking for leaders. We are not looking for a black belt bureaucrat, okay, who can write excellent memos to the president. So focus on you, right? And being thoughtful is a part of this memo. So that's my contribution to discussion.
Very interesting points, Kian. And I think, David, you made the suggestion that an applicant select a topic outside their particular area of professional expertise. And I see a real benefit to that, because you're showing range. You're showing intellectual curiosity. You don't have to be absolutely expert in that other field, but you're showing that you have interest in it, perhaps passion, as you say, Kian. So that's one way to approach it. If you feel, I'd say to anyone in the audience that says, no, I really want to write about something that is in my field, then
Go for it.
Go for it, yes. And I'd echo what Kian said, is that presented in a way that shows a different side of yourself. Meaning, if you are the neurosurgeon, you're someone who, I don't know exactly what they do, but it's highly technical, hands-on, serious, high-stakes stuff. But show that you're able to make an argument, make it, present it in a compelling way, and present the various components in the right order, as a number of the panelists have stated, and that you are somewhat realistic about life. I mean, I will sense a lot of passion in these essays and in the memo, and particularly about, Mr. President, you have got to support this, because if not, you're not the man or woman I thought I voted for. It's so important, and nobody before you's been able to do it, but you can do it. You need to signal, again, to David's point about you're being hired. Number one, folks are looking at you as a leader, and they're looking for your potential down the line to have even greater impact than you've had. But they're also eager to know whether you wear well and can make a contribution during the actual fellowship year. And so you need to signal, it's an opportunity for you in that memo to show that you do have a sense that things cost money, and that the president has to make trade-offs. You could signal that there is a Congress, and as we're hearing tonight, sometimes you have divided government, and a president has to face that. And so there are other circumstances, and that there are international affairs to deal with, complexities around the world, in this country and around the world. So I would just say that both you can show your passion, but also show that you're a thoughtful person that is going to be a great contributor to a team that has to get real work done. So moving on, here's a biggie. I think this is the pièce de la résistance, potentially the grand slam, the motivation for becoming a White House Fellow. And I'd really like to hear very briefly, we've got to get to questions. Sir, I would like Crystal to lead off, and great if anybody wants to add on to what Crystal has to say, because this is a very important one.
Yeah, I think this is really where you have to take some time and do some reflection before you put pen to pad. It is becoming a White House Fellow is one of the greatest privilege I think we will all say of our lives. It's a decision not to be taken lightly. You're taking a time away from your career, so you have to be really thoughtful. So your motivation, I would hope your essay reflect why now, why you're applying to be a White House Fellow right now. Your most authentic reason, perhaps, is to come to DC to understand policy, or you feel you understand a certain part of policy and need greater exposure. So whatever the most authentic reason is, I think this is also an opportunity in the essay to expand upon your big vision and audacious goal for your life. Perhaps you can't get to where you feel like you can be professionally without the fellowship. It's okay to reflect that. But I would just encourage you, before you even put pen to pad, to really do some deep reflection. Recognize that the White House Fellowship is not a platform for you to prepare to run for office. One of the most important advice that I got is, we are selecting leaders, but it's really an opportunity to come to DC and not be a leader per se, but to support your principal, whoever that may be. And so it's a chance for you to step into a support role and not necessarily a outward facing role. So really reflect around why now, what's the big audacious goal, and do the work internally to answer that question.
Great. Other comments?
I like to add that the way I looked at my experience is that I was asking the commission to invest in me by giving me a slot in the fellowship program. So when you're asking people to invest in you, you have to make darn sure that you can show them that you are a good investment, that there will be returns, long-term returns, and returns not to yourself, not enriching yourself, but to the society, to the country, and maybe to the world, and surely to the alumni body. So look at things that way, that you are an investment opportunity, okay? Make sure you are a very good one when you present yourself to the commission.
Well said. Anyone else? A point I would like to make on this is that it's important to signal that you understand what the White House Fellowship is about. And this takes not only, as Crystal is saying, requires you to reflect on your goals, reflect on, as Kian's saying, is what can this fellowship help me do or learn, or help me develop myself in such a way that I can be that great investment for the commission. So it takes reflection on yourself, on your goals, etc. But also you need to really signal that you understand what the fellowship was created for and what the real life experience is about. As Crystal says, you're not coming to Washington to advise Joe Biden, for an hour every day, or to get on the Sunday talk shows representing the administration. That's not going to happen right away. So it's important to signal that you have a sense of the reality of the fellowship, what the experience is likely to be, but also a sense of what that fellowship was, the fellowship program was created for almost 60 years ago by Lyndon Johnson. And it's been supported by every president of both parties since that time. That there's a vision for the White House Fellowship, and that is to signal that you understand what that is and how you, if given the opportunity, could fulfill that.
So Janet, if I may
Yes.
introduce, say, a quote from President Johnson back in the day when the program was founded. And it simply states, and this is included in some of our literature that you'll see, our recruiting brochures, you may find it on our website, but it's a genuinely free society cannot be a spectator society. And so if you have an interest in public service, this is an opportunity for you to demonstrate that. Don't be as, David and I were part of a podcast yesterday, and one of our more recent alumni described it as being on the field instead of being on the sidelines. When you become a White House Fellow, you have, again, another way the fellowship has been described as a front row to history. No fellowship, I will say right now, is alike. No placement is alike in any given year. And you really cannot predict ahead of time what that's going to be. I am struck by other alumni who I've had a chance to talk to, such as someone who's a first responder, and he has an article that just came out, and he just so beautifully talks about how his experience as a White House Fellow was as far away as you could possibly get from his daily work as an LAPD officer. And it was such an enriching experience for him. And he has gone on to do some just wonderful things. And he has gone back to his community. Other people have described it as getting to know governance at the highest levels. How does the system work? So I can take that information back to my community, to my work area, and make things better. As cliche as it sounds, it is in the end about trying to make the world a better place.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Margarita. Let's move on to the letters of recommendation. I will lead off and say, this is another opportunity to show different facets of yourself, to show that you are a full person, as my colleagues here have each touched on. Important that your recommenders really know you, that they can say something in their authentic voice. We've talked about authenticity. There needs to be authenticity to the message that they deliver to the readers. And it's also important to spotlight people who have known you at different stages of your life, or in different arenas in which you function. Anyone else?
have a couple-
I'm
Please
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead.
I would just add that you need to coordinate the focus of the letters among your recommenders. So not all three of them will say one thing about you. They need to say 3 or 6 things about you, right? So when you ask them to write a recommendation letter, tell them that you'd like for them to focus on this aspect of your life or that aspect of your life. That way there will be a fuller picture of you through these letters.
Great point. Crystal, did you have something?
Yeah, that is a very excellent point. Couple of other thoughts. One of the values at my company is real talk. So just to be really clear, you can always tell a recommender who knows someone versus they've been asked to just write a letter of recommendation because perhaps you think their title is going to go a long way. It is more valuable to have a recommender who really knows you and can speak to you as a person, professionally and personally. So I would think about that. 2, if you can maybe get your eyes on it, your recommendation, I think that's important. Sometimes you do see people use prior applications to maybe graduate school or other fellowships. And it's so terrible. And you see that one line that's like, we think they'll be a great Truman Fellow, right? So just be really thoughtful with your essays and your recommenders with reusing recommendations. Metrics, as David said earlier, so perhaps you're coming from consulting or banking, it would be helpful to know if they believe you are in the top 1% of your class, your consulting class, because that matters in certain fields and it really helps us to gauge how you rank or stack compared to your peers. And then lastly, just as we recommended, be authentic in your essays. So I have read some amazing recommendations that don't use like traditional recommendation jargon. This person is outstanding leader, but they're very authentically written. And you can tell that they know the person inside and out, who they're going to be. So I would really encourage you to think strategically about your recommenders, who's a great writer, who can speak to you as a whole person, and as stated before, diversify so they're not all speaking to your same top 3 attributes. That's it.
Great. Well, I'll make one final point on that, and it's similar to the point I made a moment ago in thinking about your motivation for becoming a White House Fellow, how you'd answer that one, is you need to signal in the motivation essay that you understand what the fellowship is really about. It's also important that your recommenders have a sense of what the fellowship is about, because I've read recommendations, glowing recommendations, where the recommender is thinking that the candidate is applying for an academic fellowship or a generic fellowship in Washington. It could be similar to something on Capitol Hill that you could do. So it's important that you communicate with the recommender about what the purpose of the fellowship really is.
Janet, I
I'd
just
like
noticed
to,
time.
I think we've got 4 minutes. We need to move to questions real quickly if we could, Margarita. I have one question here I want to start off with, and that is, the personal information section requires you, this came in before this evening's program started, it requires you to go
or professional or personal accomplishments, especially ones that highlight your commitment to public service. Definitely include it. If it's either like a fourth or fifth repetition of something that's already there, then probably avoid a laundry list situation. But if it does kind of create that perfect, if it adds to the collage of your application, definitely do include it.
right. Or if it perhaps shows another facet, again, something that you might not, you might not have gotten to in your essay on your career or on community service, that maybe you were #1 in the state in tuba playing. That's cool. And people are interested in speaking to folks who have breadth of experience. And again, intellectual curiosity, curiosity about the world, and other skills. That's fun. Another question that's come in is,
Janet, allow
please.
me to alert the audience on this, okay? It's important for you
Yeah.
to remember what Janet said at the beginning. Be truthful, because this kind of respect into your past. If you are not truthful, let's say you claim to be the quarterback of your high school, but it's not so, because it's dangerous, because at some point, you're so lucky, you get to the final stage and the FBI will go and investigate you in order for you to get a secret or top secret clearance for the fellowship.
Yeah.
And if they find out that you didn't say the truth, you're in trouble. It's in writing, okay? Be truthful.
And yes, and for
Right.
example, the FBI check, they not only will ask you questions, they're going to ask your neighbors of
Yes.
every address that you've ever
So if
listed.
your neighbor did not hear you playing the tuba, do not say that you played tuba.
So Janet, there's a question I'd like to elevate,
Yes.
if I may.
Please.
Someone is asking if there's ever been an exception to the undergraduate requirement, the need for a college degree. And since we have Rose on the line, I would love if she would give us her take on that.
Yes, that question was presented to me today, and I am looking into it. I have gone back as far as I know. It's not in the executive order, but it has been a requirement at the last, say, at least 15 years. So I'm investigating that, and as soon as I find an answer, I'll get back to you. But as far as I know, it, and Margarita, you mentioned this to me before, that it was not a requirement during your fellowship. Isn't that correct?
Actually, I think it was during my fellowship, but interestingly, at the last conference that we had, Rose, I became aware of at least 2 people who told me about other people who did not have the undergraduate degree. So it's a question mark.
It is a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have one answer for that. Okay. Yes, there was a case that the person not yet received a graduate degree. I mean, a bachelor
College.
degree.
Yeah.
Right. It was David Newman. He was a senior in college at UCLA when he applied, and he actually was awarded the fellowship in March. Then he received his bachelor degree in May at UCLA. Yes.
Well, you know, the selection criteria does say that you should have a bachelor's degree at the time you become a fellow. So you can still be a student and have received your degree, but at least up until the time that you become a fellow. But I think the question is really aimed to people who do not have an undergraduate degree. And I am definitely looking into it. I will notify everyone, and we can hopefully get it up as soon as I come to. I'm going to check with White House counsel as well on that. So it is.
Rose, and we're going to send out a follow-up email for everyone who's participated in the webinar today, so we can have that response. Or if it's not ready if you don't have the response right away, we could post it on the White House Fellows Foundation website. I'd like to pose one more question for the group, and then we need to move on to talk about resources for applicants going forward. And that is, what if I work for myself? What if I'm an entrepreneur and I don't have a supervisor to write on my behalf? Is there a requirement that someone to whom I report now or have very recently reported that individual submit a letter of recommendation?
Esteban, did you want to take that one?
And I'm reading through it. Hang on, sorry. I'm a visual person, so I need to
Yeah.
question. If you can read.
I can jump in. So I was self-employed when I was a White House Fellow, doing consulting with education organizations. So if that is your case, or perhaps you run a family business, I've seen White House Fellows who have family businesses, you can always look to recommenders as current or former clients, your former supervisors in other organizations, or other leaders within your organization who can speak to you as a leader. So there are ways to get creative there if you're self-employed or run your own family business.
That's great. That's great. Elizabeth, I know you're out there. Any other questions from the audience that we might respond to?
Forgive me.
Yes.
Did we answer the question if someone can have an alum review their application?
Can an applicant have an alum review their application prior to submission? I'm going to suggest that David Moore and Esteban perhaps take a crack at this one.
Okay. Thanks, Janet. I would say that if you have a fellow review your application or your essays and offer their thoughts, that person would then have to recuse themselves at any point later in the process to say, if whether it's reading applications or at the regional interview level or at the national interview level. And I think, I suspect that occurs on occasion. So I guess that would be my answer. Esteban, you want to elaborate, or Rose?
Well, I don't think there's an absolute prohibition from having somebody, because we have, people mentor, alums mentor applicants all the time. But I agree that if that particular person or alumni happen to be on a regional panel or is a commissioner now, they definitely would not be able to participate in any deliberation.
Yep.
And I'd circle back to the A word, authenticity. That a number of us have used this evening. And that is, review is one thing, having someone else kind of shape your essays and give you a voice, if you will, in the written word that is not your own. It's not really a great thing to do.
That'll be obvious.
Yeah, it might be obvious to the reader, and even if it's not obvious to the reader, if you are, as Kian would say, so lucky as to move on to the next stage, an interviewer is going to be looking for consistency between the person you present in writing on the application and the person with whom they're speaking in on site or online, however the interview is conducted.
I have a positive advice to the audience on this. Now, if that alum is that close to you and he or she knows you well, why don't you ask that person to write a recommendation to be included in your application? Because that carries a lot of weight, okay? Of course, that person should not read and rate your application or interview you, but adding his or her voice onto your application is a big plus to us. The rest of us who read that and see that Janet Abrams or David Moore recommended this candidate, That means a lot.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on. Jen Swanson, if you could share with us our final slide. And Margarita, do you want to touch on these?
Sure. So I suspect that many of you have already been to our homepage, which you see there, www.whff.org. We created this page for you, the aspiring candidate, to make this process as transparent as possible, to provide at your fingertips a host of information ranging from the selection process, the timeline, as well as videos that we've recorded in the past, a gallery of notable alumni, and even class pictures from every decade. So I hope that you will use this resource widely. I like to say that it will become your best friend if you are very serious about applying for the fellowship. We created this website for you, so we hope that you will take advantage of that resource. Don't hesitate to reach out. Some of us can be found on LinkedIn or other means. I will share with you that when I applied to become a White House Fellow, I didn't know any alumni. So I didn't have an alumni to read over my application, but I did reach out to some close friends and I asked them to review it. And inevitably they came back with things that they thought were missing as part of, as has been said before, your story. Because that is the most important thing to impart to us, is what is your story? So that we walk away with a holistic view of who you are and what it is that you want to do and how will the fellowship fit into that. So I think that's it. You see it on this slide here, a bunch of other resources. I hope that that you will use all of them at your disposal. Thank you, Janet.
Yes, thank you, Margarita. Beautifully stated. And I would draw everyone's attention to the frequently asked questions section on our website, because a lot of questions that might pop to mind are addressed there. I want to thank all of my fellow panelists, Rose and Esteban in particular, our great partners who lead day-to-day the White House Fellows Program and this very elaborate multi-month selection process that kicked off early this month. And applications are due, we know, in early January. And then the real work begins, I'm sure, I know, for Rose and Esteban. And thanks to Kien for beaming in essentially the morning of November 17th. Very impressive. How does the future look from there?
It looks good. It looks good.
It looks good. Great.
Keep
And
moving.
Crystal in Austin, and David. David, where are you? Are you in Washington State?
I am actually in Oregon. My
You're in
parents' house
Oregon.
this evening. I am.
I knew you were in the
Indeed.
Great Northwest. That's wonderful.
I am.
And thanks to Elizabeth Gillis, who is in Virginia, who's done all the work on the behind the scenes on addressing questions, to Ryan Torianen, who's another recent White House Fellow who has helped us think about questions and our whole process for tonight, what would be helpful for the audience. And special thanks to Jen Swanson, who's helped put together our program. We wish everyone the best of luck. If you apply this year, get going. Great to ask your recommenders early, because the holidays are coming and you don't want them to get too sleepy with the turkey. You want them to start writing now on your behalf, and to start inputting those elements of your background and resume into the system. Whether you apply this year or in the future, or even if you opt not to go forward with the fellowship application, we just encourage you in all of your efforts to be of service in your professions and your communities. So thank you for joining.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.